We just wanted to start off by welcoming you all to our book talking professional development today. We've got Dr. Whittingham, Dr. Amy Thompson, Dr. Kevin Powell, and myself. I'm Dr. Shaw. But before we really jump in, I'll let everyone else, kind of introduce, talk about themselves. But we did want to make sure everyone knew that we have multiple online degree programs if you are a teacher and looking to, expand on your different roles within a K-12 school. We've got those. We also have our PhD program that includes tracks for K-12 education leadership or the digital age curriculum and instruction. Library media, of course, is near and dear to my heart. Instructional technology, if you are looking to certify as an online teacher, we have those grad certificates and master's degrees. Literacy, I know right now, reading programs and dyslexia are huge in our K-12 schools. Our kids need specialists in those areas. We also have just MAT programs for all different areas, including special education. Does anyone else want to jump in and promote a program? School counseling, we definitely need great school.
Well, I always have to pop in and promote our literacy program. I can't help it. So I am Amy Thompson. I'm the program coordinator for the Masters in Literacy and the Dyslexia endorsement. We are the only International Dyslexia Association accredited institution in the state and one of a limited number across the United States. We are booming and I love it. One exciting thing is in our program, you'll meet people from all over the United States. We're in about 30 at last count in 3 different countries. So you'll get to get perspectives all over the world.
Okay, well, I'm Jeff Whittingham. I'm a program coordinator for the Advanced Studies and Teacher Leadership Program. That's a program for teachers who want to stay in the classroom but don't want to change careers. They want a master's, but they don't want to change careers. So it's a core of 5 leadership courses and then a track of 5 courses that you can choose. We have lots and lots of different kinds of tracks.
I'm Kevin Powell. I'm an assistant professor in the LIBM program.
So in the chat, our technology TLC posted just some different reminders, be reminded or mindful of background noise. So if you'll stay muted unless speaking, and we will give an opportunity if anyone would like to book talk their own books. We are recording this session. You will also get your PD certificate through your email that you signed up for within 24 to 48 hours. This will count as 2 hours. So if you don't see it in the next few days, you might check your spam folder. If you're interested in any of our programs, Melissa included the link there, and then there is also an evaluation form. We would love feedback, to know how we could better prepare or offer professional development for you all. There are lots of other sessions available for free this summer, so we've included the link there, and then you can also view any of our past sessions on our YouTube channel. And if you guys would, I love that Sloan already started or Jana Powell started putting in where you all are from and your names. If you would like to, that'd be great. I'm going to stop sharing so that way, Jeff, are you going to go first with our book talks?
Yes. Are we ready?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen.
Jeff, while you're getting prepared, I'm going to put a link to a survey in the chat. If anyone would like to sign up to Book Talk, that way I can organize while Jeff and the others are talking. I'll get them into like category to make sure that maybe we start with the younger books and move up, or we could start with the high school books and move up. But I'm going to put that in there.
Okay, can you see my first book
Yes.
on the screen? Okay, so today I'm going to share my favorite books from the Charlie Mae Simon recommended list. Amy, Aaron, and I are on the Charlie Mae Simon committee, and this year for the first time, we created a list of recommended books besides the books that are on the actual list. So these are books that we all really liked, but didn't get enough votes to be on the list. The first book is What Stars Are Made Of by Sarah Allen. It is about a young girl who has Turner syndrome, which means she will not be able to grow, and she has to have growth hormone, and she will never be able to have a child. Her sister is married and has a lot of financial troubles, and her husband has to go work out of state. So the main character in this book is really worried that her sister's child will have Turner syndrome. And so she decides that the way that she's going to help is she's going to enter a competition writing an essay about the woman who discovered what stars are made of. And with that money, she's going to give it to her sister, so her sister will not be in what they call the financial black hole. And then if they're out of the financial black hole, then the baby will be born and everything will be happy and well. It's a really sweet story. Grasping Mysteries, Girls Who Love Math by Janine Atkins. This is another really good book. I am ashamed to say that of all the girls in this book, I only knew Florence Nightingale and Katherine Johnson. So it's just what the title says. It's a book about a nonfiction book about girls who love math and who made great strides in the area of mathematics. Letters from Cuba by Ruth Bahar. This is about a daughter and her father who travel from Poland to Cuba to try to make enough money to get the rest of their family out of Poland before World War II. Once they get to Cuba, they find that there are also Nazis in Cuba, even though I didn't know that there were Nazis in Cuba. And they start selling things and aren't being very successful. Eventually, they get a sewing machine from their landlord, and the girl starts designing and making dresses and selling them in a local fabric store. Then that gets the attention of a department store, and they start selling the dresses in the department store, all the while trying to make enough money to bring the rest of their family to safety in Cuba. Dr. Powell is the one who put me onto this book, and I really, really loved it. The Blackbird Girls by Anne Blankman. This is about two girls who are living near the Chernobyl accident that happened in Chernobyl in Ukraine. It's very timely now. I've been hearing lots of reports about, or initially when the Ukrainian war started, about the volatility of Chernobyl still to this day. In this book, the two girls' fathers are at Chernobyl when the accident happens, and they leave the area. The main character and her mother leave to go live with their grandmother in a different city, and they take the secondary character with them. The secondary character has always bullied the main character and never liked her. And so this is about their friendship as they are going away from the accident and everything's going well. And the secondary character is coming to realize that the things she heard about the main character are not true and about her family. And everything's going well until the secondary character's mother shows up in the city where they're staying to take her back. Class Act by Jerry Craft. This is the sequel to New Kid. New Kid won the Charlie May Simon Award this last year. It's a graphic novel about a young boy who has a scholarship to a private school. And in the first book is mainly about him transitioning into this new school and the microaggressions that he encounters. The second book is about how he is realizing that he has to work 10 times harder than his white students. And one of them is his really good friend, and the pressure of having to work 10 times harder for the same output puts a strain on his relationship with his friend, but eventually they do work out the issue. My Life in the Fish Tank by Barbara D. It's about a young girl whose brother has a mental breakdown and is put into a mental facility. And her family tells her that she's not allowed to talk about it to anybody, so she can't talk about it to her friends. She can't share anything about it, which puts a lot of pressure on her. At the same time, she's invited to join this lunch group at school, and she realizes that all these kids at school in the lunch group have some kind of problem, and she doesn't understand why she's been in the group, not realizing that the reason she's in the group is because of her brother. The only place that she gets any kind of respite is when she's in science class, and she goes and hangs out with the crayfish in the science classroom. And near the end of the book, she has a chance to go to a summer aquatics program, but she's not sure she should because she thinks she needs to stay and help with her brother. I really love this book.
Hey, Jeff, can I pipe in for a
Yes,
second?
yes.
The My Life in a Fish Tank, that one is so timely, I think right now, but I think it's a great book for parents to read and school counselors, because one of the things about that one, the parents keep honing it into this little girl's head. Don't talk about it. She stops really talking to her friends, and she's not doing anything, but her older sister apparently has been talking about it at her school. And I think about sometimes how we kind of stifle some of our children or our kids, our own kids, and tell them don't talk about things, but they need to. And so she really took that rule to heart. And so even in that group, the lunch group, she didn't share. And so I think it would be a great one to have like on a parent shelf, or to read as a parent student book group. But definitely, social emotional learning. It was huge. I loved it.
Yes, I did too. Okay, Born Curious, 20 Girls Who Grew Up to Be Awesome Scientists. This is just what it says it is. It's a nonfiction book about 20 girls who grew up to be scientists. I'm ashamed to say that I didn't know any of them. So I think this is a great book to start sharing the word that there are lots of great women in our past who grew up to be scientists, and that science is not just a boys' game. Wink, Surviving Middle School with One Eye Open, is about a young boy who has an eye condition that is causing him to go blind. He gets a second opinion from a different doctor, and the doctor says he thinks he can save the vision in one eye. So they start doing these treatments where they lock his head into like a vise and shoot lasers into his eye. He has to do this every afternoon. So he becomes friends with the technician who does the testing, and the technician eventually teaches him how to play guitar. And all this while, the main character is going to middle school. He's wearing a hat because he has to keep his head covered. He's got a patch on his eye. He gets bullied because of it. And one day the technician says, "You should meet my nephew. He plays drums. You can start a band." And so he puts him into contact with him. And when they get together, he realizes that the drummer is his biggest bully from school. It's about how he and the bully work through their problems and form this band. I really, really love this book.
I will also say that my 11-year-old son highly approves of this book as well. He really liked it.
Oh, good.
He read it recently.
Where Have All the Bees Gone? Pollinators in Crisis by Rebecca Hirsch. This is a very, I will say, scary book because it talks about all the different bee species across the world and what's happening to them, and that many of them are dying off. It states the fact that over 75% of all food that is pollinated by bees. So bees are very important to us, and especially in the food chain. So again, a very interesting book just to learn about bees and learn about their habitat and what's happening to their habitat, but also a little scary to think about if we don't have bees, that we will not have the food access that we have now. Erin,
Yeah.
did you like this one?
I loved it. As a former science teacher, environmental, like this is one, I think if you read that one with your upper elementary, even your middle level, it will fire kids up to really think about our environment. And that's something that's been near and dear to my heart since 7th grade, when Mr. Klinger told us that, I don't know, something about littering. And if we continued at the pace that we were going, like, it would look like a giant thing of hoarders, we would have litter like piled. And I have always been very interested, but that was something, my husband has talked about the last several years. There really aren't any toads around for Toad Suck, weekend here in Central Arkansas. But I think about all of the changes, but this one was great. It's phenomenal. I know it's science. Amy, you would like it too. Amy Thompson is not my science person, but maybe. Read it. It's great.
I will.
Okay. Beast Face to Face with the Florida Bigfoot by Watt Key. This is about a young boy who's traveling with his parents one night. They have a car accident, and the last thing that the main character sees is a creature in front of the car. Well, when he comes to in the hospital, his parents are missing, and so he has to go live with an uncle who he doesn't know very well. But he runs away to the forest or to the Everglades, it's in Florida, to try to find his parents and to try to find the Bigfoot that he thinks have taken his parents. I didn't realize Bigfoot was such a big deal until I read this book, but apparently Bigfoot is big, especially in the Northwest states. But this is definitely a guy book. I don't mean to be sexist, but it's definitely a book that will interest survivalist kids who are interested in survival, because that's basically what he's doing, living in the forest as he's trying to find Bigfoot.
And this one's an interesting take. I thought it was great, but you obviously don't have boys, Jeff, or you would have known that Bigfoot is huge, not figuratively and literally. This is one that I know my boys would have loved. And I think Lonnie, we ended up listening to this one. He's going into 9th grade. So he was a little older for it, but yeah, he got caught up in the story too. It was really good.
On the Horizon by Lois Lowry is a book in verse about two different horizons: the horizon of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and then the horizon in Japan after the dropping of the nuclear bombs. It is based on her own experience, Lois Lowry's experience as a child. She a few years ago found a picture of her playing on the beach in Hawaii where she was raised, and in the background there is the Arizona passing by her in the background. This was well before the bombing, so it's a It's a really interesting tale. Aaron, you really like this one too, right?
I couldn't find my unmute. So this one, I listened to this one too, and I was listening to it. It was really short. And it's told in like it's poetry. It's powerful. But I think all the way up through high school would find connections for this one. Veterans Day activities and things. This one, you could do this one, I feel like district wide. I don't know that the kindergarten, you know, that the lowest, little people scare me, so I don't know everything about them. But I know from upper elementary all the way through high school, this had some great pieces in it, and it had those ties between, you know, the bombing of Hiroshima and you know, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And so I thought it's fabulous. Has anyone out there read this one? Have many? You guys must. Like, I wanted this one on the Charlie Mae Simon list. It was deep, you know, it's a little heavier, but it's not too heavy. So, and it, like I said, it's short. It's not, you could get through it pretty quickly.
Yes. Okay. The Lonely Heart of Maybelline by Kate O'Shaughnessy. It's about a young girl who does not know her father, and her mother wants to be a singer and takes a job singing on a cruise ship for the summer. So she's left living home alone, but there's a neighbor who lives in an RV next door who's going to watch out for her. While she's snooping through the house, she discovers that her father has a nationwide country music show on the radio. He's a DJ. So she contrives a story to get the neighbor in the RV to take her to Nashville, where she's going to enter a singing competition. What she's really trying to do is get to the singing competition where her father is a judge, so she can get to meet her father. So it's all about this road trip that they go on to get to Nashville so she can finally meet her father. Becoming Muhammad Ali by James Patterson and Kwame Alexander. I did not read this book until after we had voted on the list. I wish I'd read it before because I really would like to push it harder. This is a really good book. It's written in two perspectives, Muhammad Ali's perspective and a friend's perspective. It covers from time he's a child until he wins the Golden Gloves at the age of 16. Kwame Alexander writes the lyrical part that is the Muhammad Ali perspective, and it's written rhyming. And then James Patterson writes the straight text from the alternating viewpoint, but a really, really good book. I wish they had made a second book, but instead at the end, they just have an afterword that sums up the rest of his career from the Golden Gloves until the end of his career. The Space Between Lost and Found by Sandy Stark Mcginnis. This is about a young girl whose mother has dementia and is forgetting about who she is. And it upsets her that her mother is forgetting her name even. So her mother is not all completely gone, and there are days when she's semi-coherent. So the girl decides that they need to do one last bucket list trip before her mother completely forgets who she is. But it's really hard to do a trip if you're a young girl and an adult with dementia. Aaron, did you read this one?
Yes, I loved this one. I did. It's got, again, some science ties to it. The mother is really interested in, was it dolphins or whales? Dolphins. With all of our whale books that we did last year, Song for a Whale, those others, I thought this one was very well done. The dad, he's trying to hold it together, but he's grieving, you know, the loss of his wife's memory. And the little girl so she doesn't want any of her friends to know what's going on, so she doesn't invite anyone over. I really, really like this one too. So yeah, I thought it was good. It's a good, sweet book.
Yes. Here in the Real World by Sarah Pennypacker is about a young boy who wants to spend his summer in the pool at his grandmother's house, but she has an accident, so he has to go to a YMCA program. After the first day, he is bored out of his mind. So he discovers next door an abandoned building that's been demolished. It's an old church. So he goes over and meets a friend who is raising a garden in tin cans beside the church, and they start taking the scraps from the building and making things. He's really into chivalry and knights. So one of the things they do is they build a moat with big concrete chunks of concrete around the building. And they're having a grand old time spending their summer together, not being supervised. And then one day a man comes and puts a sign up that says the property is for sale. And if the property sells, then his moat and his castle will all go away, and his friend will lose her garden. Erin, I know you like this one.
Someone said the form needed a permission, so I'm trying to fix that. Thank you, Tarina. I appreciate you looking. But yes, this was one of my favorites that we read last year for Charlie Mae Simon that didn't make the list. Kind of reminds me a little bit of The Bridge to Terabithia. But it also had a great science tie. Like I always go back and I think, could I use this for a science class? And you can't. There ends up being the two kids end up creating this sanctuary almost for these birds that are migrating. And so it was cool, but it's not as sad as The Bridge to Terabithia. I will give that away for you guys. I'll just never forget, my sister and her husband took my niece Melina to watch the movie for Bridge to Terabithia. If you've ever seen the commercial, it looks like this huge fantasy world, and great movie. And Morgan called me after and she said, you didn't tell me how sad this was going to be. Melina is like heartbroken. I think she was like 4th grade. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, whoever did the advertising for that movie didn't tell you, it wasn't me. So yeah, I loved this one. I thought it was great.
Okay, After the Worst Thing Happens by Audrey Vernick. I'm not sure how to do this one because I don't want to tell you the worst thing that happens. But in this book, something really bad happens to the main character, and it's basically her dealing with the aftermath of the thing that happens throughout the rest of the book. One thing that she does do is she befriends a neighbor who has a child who's autistic, and she starts helping with the child. And that's a really sweet story as she is going on. But again, I don't want to give this away because if I tell you the worst thing that happens, then you'll know. You will need a box of Kleenex though for this one because it is very sad. Ways to Make Sunshine by Renee Watson is about a young girl whose parents have gotten on harder times. They've had to sell their house and move to a smaller house where she is not happy. And so it's about how she has to try to find the best of what's going on with her life and to make sunshine out of everything. I'll be honest and say I didn't love this one. It was okay. It didn't have a very strong plot line to me. It's been compared to Ramona and Beezus, but again, not my favorite. And finally, Echo Mountain by Lauren Woke. I love Aaron Woke. This is about a young girl whose family in the Depression ended up living in a cabin that is owned by the family in the hills, and so they are subsistence farming, and this is something new to them. The father is out working one day and has a tragic accident. The main character blames herself for the accident, and the father is in basically a coma. So the main character decides that she's going to go to the top of the mountain to find a witch who can give her a remedy to help her father. And when I say witch, I don't mean an actual witch like on Harry Potter. I mean a witch, like an old herbalist who lives up in the mountain and collects herbs and weeds and things and makes poultices and remedies for disease. So she goes to the top of the mountain to seek this witch's advice and to get something that will help her father come out of his coma.
I really like this one because some books are really good at setting. Like this is a great setting book. I'm not really a huge like plot guy. So this one has great setting, really good writing. There are moments, and it's actually the plot is what sometimes bores me with this book. It's a little long, but it's so well written. I suggest it especially for a middle grade reader who is like, you know, wants to read a longer book.
Right, right. Okay, well, those are the ones that I have to share today. Who's going to go next?
I can go ahead. My books are mostly picture books. And I was kind of thinking about what I would do to talk about the picture books. And I asked my 9-year-old daughter, and she said, well, just show one picture from each of the books, because the best picture can kind of show a little bit more about the picture book. So all of these are actually really new too. They're all like 2022, so that's kind of cool too. So I've been on a picture book kick. This first one is called, oh, I gotta unblur my screen. Just a second. I forget about that. Now you can see the cool drum set we bought. Pretty nice, huh? So this book is called Hot Dog. Really great. And if anyone's feeling the anxiety over the last couple of years, this is a great book for you to read. The hot dog is, the dog's name is basically Hot Dog. And Hot Dog is kind of like living in the city, really anxious all the time, and then gets to go to the beach. And I'll show you the page where he's so happy to be at the beach with his owner and running around, and he gets to run around. You can kind of see it here. Really great pictures in this one. And you can tell the first part of the book is, you know, there's a lot of busyness and red and just like anxiety. And then like you can totally tell on this page. And then things get better when they get to go to the beach. And this is in like Long Island or something, because they're in New York City and they take the train to the beach. And they come back and they're very content and happy at the end of the book after they had their time at the beach. So this is a really great book, and by an author that's pretty well known, Doug Salati. That's Hot Dog. So great book for all ages. Certainly would be a good one for K through 2. This one is by Dan Santat, and it's called The Blur. I love this book. It doesn't have many words in it, but it's basically about like how fast kids grow up. So it starts with a baby and it ends with graduation. So this is a graduation book. This is a baby book. This is a middle grades. Anyway, any way you look at it, and just cherishing those moments with your kids. Really great little book. Let's see, what was her favorite picture in this one? Actually, I don't know if we picked a favorite picture in this one, but you can certainly. My favorite was this one right here. Those ultra magnetic powers that babies have. I know with my children, I like to tell the story of when we went to Trader Joe's once, and these people, total strangers, were like talking to each other, and they're like, that baby looks just like the Gerber baby. You know, so those kind of fun things about having kids and how adults gravitate toward babies and things like that. So, and this is just a great parent-child book to read aloud. Another one that I like, I have two books that are kind of about, that I'd say that are about immigration. Or maybe this one isn't as much about immigration, but it's called Rosa's Song, and this boy moves into an apartment building, and this one's by Helen Coury. And it's one of those places where people are always moving in and out. And she says at the end of the book, when she grew up, she lived in an apartment building, and it's like people would just disappear. One day they were there, one day they weren't. And I'd make friends with these people, and then they were gone. And then maybe we had to move on. So this is about that transition that can happen, and that can happen in people's lives, especially with kids. So this one, from a kid's perspective, is particularly effective in talking about that sort of thing, making friends and having to have the challenge of the friend being gone. So we chose this picture, which is a pretty sad little picture here, if you can tell. This is when the main character finds out Rosa and her family had to move away. Where? Jay felt the tears coming down. His mother wrapped him in a hug. Back to where they're from. But why didn't she tell me? His mother cried too. I don't think she knew. They had to leave quickly. They didn't have a choice. So this is a pretty, it's a thought-provoking book. You can have conversations about it. It's a really interesting book. Rosa's Song. And then the next one, this one is called The Note Bookkeepers. Anybody heard of this one? This is pretty brand new too. The Note Bookkeeper is by Brezzano and Mora, and it's a story of kindness from the border. And this is based on a true story, and it's about the person on the other, like in Mexico, who is the notebook keeper. Keeps track of all the names of the refugees who want to get into the United States. And what's interesting about this book is one of the characters, they go through the process of trying to get into the United States, and every day they'll write down names of people who want to go in. The notebook keeper will write down the names, and then they'll let the people know who are actually able to go across the border and get into the United States. What happens at the end of the book is the notebook keeper actually gets chosen to go to the United States, and so the main character takes over as the notebook keeper. A super interesting book, super timely, about the Texas-Mexico border. In particular, or just the United States border. The picture in this one is, I don't know if I put a bookmark in here. Belinda is the notebook keeper. One day, Belinda's number is called. I am sad but happy too. I believe you two are the ones to take care of this for us now. It's hard saying goodbye to Belinda, our notebook keeper. I wonder what will happen to her. I wonder when our number will be heard. So really interesting, really thought-provoking book too. And then I have a couple more. This one is called If You Find a Leaf. And it is by Sicuro, S-I-C-U-R-O. I love this book because I'm a tree person, but I'm terrible at knowing the names of trees. So this is kind of fun in that respect. And it has a super crafty idea in it. Let me show you the pictures of this one real quick. So this one's about a girl with a big imagination who finds a leaf and dreams with that leaf, and has really great pictures. So for instance, on this page, the leaf is on top of her head and acts as a hat. On another page, it is the boat, the sail from the boat. On other pages, it is a funny mask with cut out spooky eyes. On another page, it could be a horn that blows announcing that we're here. So it's pretty neat. And at the end of the book, she talks about how she made the book. And first, she photographed some scenes, and she photographed those illustrated scenes, and she was like, okay, when I get the leaves, what happens is they always dry out on me. So what am I going to do to keep these leaves so they still continue to have their color? Well, she explains in here what she uses. She uses a glycerin bath method, and she soaked them for like 3 to 5 days. And then what she did was the leaves then kind of, if you can see right here, it kind of inspired her. Like for instance, one leaf would be like a hat. Another leaf you can see would be like an umbrella. And so you draw pictures around them, and then you can use like glue or, I don't know if you all have heard of Mod Podge, glue or Mod Podge to stick the leaf in place when you draw it. So it's got a really cool little crafty idea at the end of the book as well. Great pictures in it. And for me, being somebody who's a budding tree enthusiast who actually want to know the different leaves and the different trees when I'm walking around the neighborhood, this has a nice little introduction and description of each of the leaves in the book. So a little fiction and nonfiction and craftiness in that one. This is actually the only one of the books that I chose that's a little bit older. This one's like from 2018. It's called If You're Going to a March. Has anybody seen this book before? It's a really good one. And it's a practical book about going to a march and what it would be like to experience going to a march. So what should you bring? What should you expect at the march? And it's certainly written for a younger audience, which is really nice. This picture that we chose, let me just show a couple of the pictures of this one. Like this is them getting there. They use the back of the pizza box to write their what they're marching about. And then they say, well, it might get boring at the march, so just be prepared. There may be music, things like that, that you should dance to. There may be cameras there. Smile at the camera if you want, that kind of stuff. And then there may be police people there as well. And then here's the picture that we chose. Now you know for sure why you came to march today. There's a warm feeling in your heart, and here's a picture of the people marching with their signs, and this is the one that my daughter in particular liked the most from this book. So it's a nice little book, interesting book, one that is once again will be a discussion starter with your students or with your kids. The last one I have is actually a chapter book. Love this book. Has anybody heard of this one? It's a couple years old, 2 or 3 years old. It's called Hope Springs. And it is by Jamie Berry. And let me just read this little tiny part of this book. I think if I read it, it'll make sense. But let me at least say a little bit beforehand. So the main character, she has moved around a lot. She's not really connected with her mom at all. Her mom is like Jeff talked about in another book, her mom happens to be a country singer, and her grandmother is the person who is kind of raising her at this point. And they move around all the time, and her grandmother kind of gets restless and will move to different towns. They've chosen this town just past the Arkansas border into Texas, and it's called Hope Springs. And in Hope Springs, there's only one reason they chose Hope Springs, and it's because of Arletta Paisley. Arletta Paisley has a show on TV, kind of like an HGTV type show that she's like it's like an organizing show. So I'll just read this little part for you. As we drove past an acre of flattened land and the makings of a huge building, my breath caught. It was all I could do to gasp and point. A billboard plastered with Arletta Paisley's face smiled down like a Texas angel, sent from above just for me. Under her face were the words, "Smart Mart Superstore opening soon." Already I had a good feeling about Hope Springs, and that billboard was like Arletta Paisley herself saying, "Jubilee," that's the main character's name, "Jubilee, darling, I'm so glad you came." And so when they go into this small town, they think they might see Arletta Paisley, they think this is going to be like a really exciting place for them, potentially, but it ends up being a small town with a bunch of small stores that's getting I guess you could probably presume is a Walmart type place, called the Smart Mart. And it has basically, they're all super anxious and worried about their small businesses. So that's part of the story is about her dealing with that. She ends up working at a small business, the main character, and she makes some friends there. And she's moved around so much, so there's a lot of this sort of, how long am I going to be here? How's this going to feel to be here? And she doesn't really want to make friends, and they have rules before they go into these towns. On the back of the book, if anyone's read The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise, which I think was a Charlie Mae Simon book, maybe this year, the author of that book gives it a glowing review. And this book reminds me a little bit of The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. It may be actually a little better written and a little less awkward in some ways than that one, but maybe not better written, because there's some really cool parts of that of Coyote Sunrise. But this one reminds me of that, a coming of age story, kind of a road story, a small town story, And it has a little bit of activism in it as well. So really interesting story that I highly suggest reading. So those are my books. Any questions about them or?
So Kevin and Jeff and Amy, at the end, are we sharing a list of our books? Maybe.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I shared that. I shared a slide deck with you. If you just want to add your titles to the end of it, that would be awesome. And I'll just share that link.
Great. I'll do that.
And I think I finally fixed, if only I had a media specialist. You know, I'm a recovering school librarian, so apparently technology is not my friend anymore. I couldn't figure out how to share. If anyone wants to sign up and do some book talks at the end of anything, any level, whatever, I think I finally have that form fixed. If it's not, shoot me another message. But Amy, do you want to go next or you want me to?
I'm happy to pop on and do it and then let you after that. Okay, so I am on the Diamond Book Award Committee. And so I am going to share with you some of the books that I really liked that did not make the Diamond list this year. So let me get my, you're going to get to not blur my background. You see my crazy office. Okay, the first one that I really like is it's called Sullivan, Who Is Always Too Loud. And I have used this one this summer with several of my students I'm doing intervention with, and they just love it because this is about a little boy named Sullivan, and he is just loud, and he's loud all the time. He cannot do anything that's not loud. He just has a giant voice. And so he's always getting in trouble. So he's finding all of these different ways that he can try to help not be loud so he doesn't wake the baby or get in trouble at school. And he doesn't experience much success. But at the end, it ends up being a good thing that he was loud. So he kind of saves the day. One thing that my kids really like is the way that the illustrations do when he's trying to keep the quietness or the loudness down. He crushes it down. You'll kind of see there. See, it looks like these green bubbles, and they just fill the pages. So his loudness bubbles up into a ferocious dino. And then when it comes out as a roar, there's all of those bubbles that he has tried to squash down, and it just comes out. So especially for your little active kids or ones that talk a lot or love to be loud, this is a great book that they could connect to and see that sometimes there's a time and a good time to be loud. So that is definitely one of my favorites. The other one my students are loving too. This one is Rescuing Mrs. Birdley. And I really like it because I taught fourth grade and then I moved to third grade before I came to UCA. And this is just so accurate. Kids think that teachers are only at school. And when they see you out in public, they're like, wow, how did you get here? Why are you here? Aren't you supposed to be at school? I mean, that's real life. And so in this book, Miranda sees her teacher out in a grocery store. The problem is that Miranda is a little bit obsessed with the Nature Joe animal show that she watches on TV. And in that, Nature Joe shares about how animals need to be in their habitats and how sometimes we have to catch them to get them back to their habitat. So she spends most of this book trying to get Mrs. Birdley back to the habitat of her classroom. And so it's funny to see when she does it. And there's several different ways she tried to tempt her. She tried to have her step through a hole. She tried to bait her with yogurt, blueberry yogurt that she knew was the teacher's favorite. And then finally, she just had to set up a trap. And she set the trap and she put her in this can and she's rolling her back to school. It says Miranda's teacher squealed the whole way back to school, just like that little lost weasel, because that's a way that she saw that animals, sometimes you had to catch them to get them back where they were going. She thought that her teacher would be so much happier that she rescued her and got her back in her habitat. And she locks her in her habitat. And it says she didn't look happy right now, but she was probably just shaken up from her little adventure. And then the end is really cute because, you know, she might see somebody else out in public that is not in their habitat. So that is a really, really cute book. Another one that I liked is called This Old Dog. Ooh, Angela, that's awesome. Amazon has Rescuing Mrs. Birdley for $2.54 for the hardcover on sale. Well, it's worth it. So hop on Amazon. Thank you, Angela. So This Old Dog is a story about a dog that has gotten older. And, you know, it's he gets up in the morning and he's a little bit achy and he yawns and he stretches. It takes him a little bit longer to get where he needs to go. He has a little girl that's his little girl, and she takes him for a walk and he's like, oh, but he says, oh, how his old hips ache, his old knees yip, his old back whines. But it's not just that. The speed of life since the girl was born is fast, fast, fast. An old dog likes to take things slow. So he just really is needing to slow down. And he wants to slow down also because he's enjoying life, as sometimes we get to do, you know, like when we think about retirement, ooh, we might get to enjoy some time. So he wants to sniff each blade of grass. He wants to find just the right rock. He wants to listen to the leaves. But that's not what the little girl does, because she wants to go fast, fast, fast and run all over the place. So he ends up limping home, and he just feels sad that he's not able to do what he needs to do for the little girl and be what he needs to be. But then the family has a baby, and the baby is able to walk. And once the baby learns how to walk, she walks over to the dog, and then that little girl is at a slower pace. So he is able to enjoy life and be at a slower pace. And he finds that he gets a little bit of spring back in his step. So it's a really cute story, This Old Dog. This is one that I think is amazing. We Will Live in the Forest Again. And my husband is a fireman, so that might be one reason that it appealed to me. The pictures are amazing. It's talking about these animals that they live in the forest and they've always lived there, and it's full of birds and animals and noises. And when it's autumn, the leaves and branches crinkle and crunch, and they think it's always going to be their home. And then one day they see a spark, and they didn't really think anything about it. And then they start to smell smoke. And then the sky turns dark. And then the fire has just gotten out of control and is chasing them out. But I really love it. It starts with the background is like all green. And when they're running out of the forest, it's very simple, but very beautiful how they did it. So, they're having this forest fire, they're having to run out. And it's just written so well. Fire snapped at our fur and feathers and hooves and paws, swallowing our trees and blackening our sky. So, we're hearing from the animal's perspective. And then when the fire is finally put out, they're back and they check it out, and it's just all black. But they are hopeful because that is their home, and they know that eventually their forest will return. And so they wait, and they know that they are going to live in the forest again in this beautiful blue and green. There's just for younger kids, it's a great way, very simple, not scary. The pictures are just amazing, but a way to talk about forest fire. So I really enjoyed this book. Another one that I like is called I Talk Like a River. And I Talk Like a River is about a little boy that he has trouble talking. He hears sounds, he hears words, but he can't say them all. They get tangled up in his mouth. He says, the pea and pine tree grows roots inside my mouth and tangles my tongue. The sea is a crow that sticks in the back of my throat. The and moon dusts my lips with the magic that makes me only mumble. And so because he has trouble with these words being stuck in his mouth, he stays quiet. And at school, he sits in the back of the class and he hopes that the teacher's just not going to see him and will ignore him so that he can just sit quietly. And one day that doesn't happen. One day she asks a question, and he is just overcome with fear. Like, I think about it, even comparing to, I talk to my literacy students all the time about round robin reading. Don't do that, because our students that have difficulties reading, the fear that gets up in them when it's their turn. So this is what was happening here. He says, when he finally speaks, he says, all they hear is how I don't talk like them. All they see is how strange my face looks and that I can't hide how scared I am. My mouth isn't working. It's full with words of the morning. And so the kids laugh at him, and his dad picks him up, and dad can tell it's not a good day. And he says, are you okay? And he said, well, it was just a bad speech day. So his dad takes him to a special place they like to go. And that is to the river. And he loves to sit out by the river and just enjoy the water and the nature. And then he says, my dad sees I'm sad and pulls me close. He points to the river and says, see how that water moves? That's how you speak. I look at the water and it says bubbling. and whirling, churning, and crashing. And so his dad tells him that he talks like a river. And he says, that is what I like to remember to help stop myself from crying. I talk like a river, or from not wanting to speak at all. I talk like a river. When the words around me are hard to say, I think of the proud river, bubbling, churning, whirling, and crashing. And it ends with, even the river stutters like I do. And so he wakes up the next morning and he goes to class, and he shares with them about his special place in the river. So that is just a beautiful book. And the last one that I'm going to share with you, I actually have on my iPad. So let me pull it up. It is called Swashby and the Sea. Let me get to the beginning. Yeah, you'll see this very well. Swashby and the Sea. And Swashby is a grumpy old man that lives by the sea. And one day he gets neighbors, and it's a woman and her little girl. And the little girl is young and rambunctious and explores and just has no inhibitions. So she gets out and plays and has fun and is loud. And so Swashby is like, I've got to get rid of these people. So he starts leaving them notes in the sand. So the first one he writes says, no trespassing. And overnight, before the little girl and her mom see it, the waves and the water do a little bit of work, and it changes no trespassing, takes all the letters away except for a few, and you end up with sing. So the little girl gets out there and just sings her little heart out. And Swashby's like, are you kidding me? So he wrote, now vanish. And the water did its thing and took out a bunch of letters, and it ended up being wish. And so he tells them, please go away. And it washes out all of the letters except for PLAY. So it says play. So finally the little girl wins him over, and he gets out there and he plays with her. And it's just a really beautiful book about how even the grumpy old man, you can touch his heart and win him over. And then he didn't like kids, and now he just loves this little girl and plays with her. So those are some of my favorites. Those are ones that were not, they're not on the list to choose from this year for Diamond, but they're ones that we read that I thought were really great. I am going to put for you all in the chat my email also, if you're interested. We allow students and teachers and classes to be readers and give us feedback. And through that feedback, the time that is spent, you get a certificate twice a year that accumulates how much time. And so you get volunteer hours on a certificate. And so I send you out the first list, which has hundreds of books on it. And then I update you each time the committee meets with ones that are deleted, so that you'll know which ones are left and to focus on. And the feedback really helps the committees. They listen to that when they're discussing the book and when it gets time to vote, so that they can hear from the students what it is that they like. It's also really helpful because sometimes it's hard to find all of these books for the committee, and sometimes it's hard to get to all of them. So if someone reads the book and sends a review that is a great book, we really need to be sure that we find it, then that's one that we'll go out and search really hard for, because we know that someone's recommended it and we need to be sure to look for it. So if that's something that you think your kiddos would be interested in, or you're interested in just being a volunteer reader and earning some service hours, I'll put my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out to me. All right, Erin.
I'm going to start off with one that is near and dear to me. So my really great friend, Kimberly Willis Holt, I met her 10 years ago on an airplane headed to Texas. I was actually headed to California for the first ALA conference I would ever get to attend. And I always have to tell my story, even though the book, The Ambassador of Nowhere, Texas, is fabulous, and I'll get to that too in a minute. I happened to sit down next to her. I had a fantastic hair day. Let's just say my hair looked really good that day. And so this lady asked me what I had done to my hair that day. And I was like, well, I washed it. She was like, well, no, what'd you put in it? And so I don't know, it's some kind of mousse, purple can you get at Walmart. So we chatted, and then a little while later, she asked Tracy and I if we were librarians. And we were like, why would you think that? Like, neither one of us had our hair in a bun. And I know I didn't wear glasses yet because I just didn't. And so we were like, yes. And then she asked, are you going to the ALA conference? And we said, yes, because we were talking about a book. I think that's where that came from. And so then we asked her, are you going to the conference? She said, no. I think Tracy asked her, well, are you a librarian? She said, no. And so we asked, what do you do? She said, well, I write children's books. And she didn't even get the words out of her mouth. We asked, well, what did you write? And she started to say, When Zachary Beaver. And Tracy came across me, and Tracy is like unflappable, very quiet, calm, demure. I'm the loud one. And I thought we would get kicked off the plane because this was the Kimberly Willis Holt National Book Award winner we were sitting next to. And I loved When Zachary Beaver Came to Town. Like, that is one of my all-time favorites. I had bought a copy of the audio for my school library. So I had a copy of the CDs, you know, this was back in the day, and a copy of the book to check out to my students. But I had happened to take the book with me on the road. And I guess my boys and I listened to it, my older boys, Joseph and Thomas. Probably they were middle school, early upper elementary. But then my dad and my niece had listened to it, and they loved the book so much. And that is one of the books that Kimberly has been asked for years, what happened to Toby? And, you know, the young man that was billed as the fattest boy in town, or in the world for the circus. And what happened to Joe? So Kimberly said she wasn't planning to write a companion or anything to go with When Zachary Beaver. She didn't really know what happened to the characters. But a few years ago, she started to think about what Toby, who he might have married. And she got amused. She was just telling the story to our Bears Right campers this last week. She kind of got tickled thinking about who Toby might have married from the small town of Antler, Texas. And so then she started to think about, well, what if they had had a child? And so this new book came out, The Ambassador of Nowhere, Texas. And when she thought about the other book that was set during, you know, the end of the Vietnam War, the late 60s, if those two characters had married, how old could their kid or child have been? And so she ended up creating the character of Riley. Riley is a girl, and Toby, one of the main characters from When Zachary Beaver, ended up being her dad. It is set during 9/11, sometime right after when the Twin Towers fell. Riley lives in this tiny town. It has grief in it. It's friendship. It's got a hint of a romance, which is really cool. I just loved when the other young man, this boy and his mom end up moving to this tiny town to get away from New York after 9/11. And everyone knows that the young man, something must have happened, but you don't really know a whole lot. But Riley offers to show him around. And so he kind of dubs her the Ambassador of Nowhere, Texas. But this is one I absolutely loved, and I'm hoping it ends up on the Charlie Mae Simon list this next year. Jeff, I think you read this one too, right? Did you like this one?
Yes, I loved it.
Okay, I did too. It's wonderful. And it really does kind of bring back some of those memories from 9/11. I know for those of us who experienced it, but I know that our students now, we still need to think about, of course, any historical perspective. And now that I think, it's 20 years later since 9/11 happened, and it really kind of brought a lot of memories flooding back to me of that day. But I think it also gives our young children just kind of a little hint of kind of what happened, but not, it's not in a scary way. So this one's great. Upper middle or, upper elementary, middle school, it's fantastic. So I'm hoping you guys can see the next one. This one, I don't know if anyone has read this, and I really can't see everybody on my screen. I'm trying to see The Last Quintessa by Donna, Barba, Higuera. It's phenomenal. It's science fiction, kind of dystopian. This little girl, Petra Pena, she read the book. I listened to this one for an audio, and I loved it because I've never taken a Spanish class. I'm going to admit, looks like somebody was trying to get into our waiting room. So I know very little Spanish, and I would love to go back and take Spanish, but this one was just phenomenal in that I don't normally remember science fiction books or even our dystopian books to really have diverse characters. You think about Katniss Everdeen. She was, a white young lady. So I just thought this one was nice in that we had a different character, but within it, there is also the collective, which is, they are, of course, trying to make everyone exactly the same and make sure that only the people who are smart enough or who have these specific characteristics of having some kind of like advanced science knowledge or advanced mathematics skills get into this new world. There's going to be a giant comet that wipes out Earth. And so Petra, when she begins her journey, she is 12. And so they have figured out how to keep everyone like, I don't know, almost frozen in time. So she wakes up 100 years later after this disaster has happened. But she's a storyteller. And so it's got a lot of Hispanic like myths and storytelling that goes on in it. And Petra is not supposed to remember anything from before, but she does. And this one was wonderful. I don't know if anyone else has read this yet. I think it won the Newbery Award, or it was one of the, might have been for the one of the finalists for the Newbery. If you have not read this one is great. Has anyone out there read it? I can't see our chat. Maybe. Okay, maybe not. Oh, Lori did. Fantastic. Okay, and looks like someone else is currently reading it. So good. Okay, so the newest book that I just finished yesterday, this one is high school level, probably 10th, 11th, 12th grade. You could have it for 9th grade. This one is written in verse, and it's short. It was not super long at all. I think it's on one of the Teen Book Award lists. I think it's the level 1, or it might be on there for the next year. It's all about grief. This young lady, Moth, her family has died in a car wreck. And so she's living with her aunt. She ends up meeting a Navajo boy who lives with his white mother, and his white stepfather in Virginia, but his dad lives back on a reservation, I believe in New Mexico. And so he and Moth end up taking this car ride. They just kind of leave and go off on this road trip. And they actually travel through a lot of the places for the Trail of Tears. And so there is a lot of diversity in this one. I don't know a lot of Navajo lore, so it's kind of woven in there. Moth is an African-American young lady, but she was a ballerina. She's a wonderful dancer, but after, of course, the car accident, she does not dance. Her friend that she meets, Sonny, he is a wonderful musician, a singer, and he won't sing anymore right now either. It's got a little bit of a first love. It's not just, it's nothing for like, I think maybe they kiss, but it's not anything just super racy. But it really brings in some different cultural differences, and it was phenomenal. It's a debut novel by Amber McBride. Has anyone read this one? I think I can see it. Oh, so Tana, you did read that one. The audiobook is phenomenal. I was reading part of it and then realized it was on the Libby app. And so I finished it yesterday, and it really has been on my mind. So yes, everybody needs to read that. This one was a beautiful book. Picked up from Whittingham shelf the other day, and it is hilarious. I don't know if you guys can see up at the top, it says meet Ben Fletcher, accidental criminal, liar, master of mohair. And it's called Boys Don't Knit in Public by T.S. Easton. This one is humorous fiction. It is British. It's got British humor because it's set in England. It's a narrative writing, so it's actually in journal format. So if you look it up, kind of reminded me a little bit of Bridget Jones' Diary. But I don't know if anyone way back in the day, early 2000s, mid 2000s, did anyone read Renaissance Angus, Thongs, and Full Frontal Snogging? Did anybody read any of those? I loved those, and I was an adult and thought they were hilarious. Blake, you thought they were, I thought they were so funny. So this one to me is kind of the boys version, because he's just kind of writing in stream of consciousness. So good. So Rhonda liked them. Tana, if you have not book talked those lately to your high schoolers, or just kind of pulled those back out, the Lois Renison, pull those back out and get those back out there. I thought those were so hilarious. So this one just captured me from the very beginning. So it starts on July 1st, and I want to read this one just a little bit. I was reading this one actually out loud to my husband last night. He even kind of chuckled, which kind of surprised me. So it says, Mom and Dad are at it again. They're doing that thing where they make food-based double entendres all the time, thinking it goes over our heads. It goes over Molly's head. She's only 6, and she never listens to Mom or Dad anyway. I guess it used to go over my head too when I was little. I'm more sophisticated. I know what they're up to, and it makes me want to vomit. On Friday night, we had chicken and baked potatoes. As she was serving, Mom said, Dave, could you get the spuds out? And Dad said, I'm always happy to get the spuds out for you. This is what passes for humor in our house. Though that wasn't quite as sick-making as today when we had a barbecue down in the park, Mom was carrying too much from the car and nearly dropped a pack of burger buns. Let me take hold of your buns, Susan, Dad said. Don't squeeze too hard, Mom said, giggling. How can I make this stuff up? Surely they know I understand the concept of a double entendre, even if Molly is too young to get it. In fact, I know that they know because Dad winked at me as he made the bun comment, trying to include me in the joke. They've both been trying to be more inclusive and chummy with me lately since ever since the lollipop lady incident. It's like they've talked it over and decided it must have been their fault and that I need more support or something. So he describes his friends. He describes his little sister, Molly. He ends up getting in trouble. They're trying to steal some liquor. And it's just hilarious, but he has a lot of ties to current things going on. So our kids, I'm afraid though, these will be dated here soon. Well, maybe 10, 15 years, but for now, they're just super funny. I love his description of his little sister, 6 years old. I wanted to find that one. He says, Molly is my little sister. She's 6. She's totally crazy. She's not unlike Lola from the kids' cartoon show, Charlie and Lola. If you haven't seen it, at the start of every show, Charlie says, this is my little sister, Lola. She's small and very funny. Except with us, I'd say, this is my little sister, Molly. She's small and completely nuts. For example, she painted her teeth in the colors of a rainbow once. She sat for ages with her mouth open to dry them out, then painted them in acrylics in the mirror. She was furious when she realized she'd done them back to front. She had to go to the hospital with blood poisoning. Also, once she ate a toad. So this one is just super funny. I think there is a sequel now. I have not picked it up, obviously, because I literally just picked this one up from Jeff's office. And I was looking in the chat. So yes, Angus, Thongs, and Full Frontal Snogging by Louis Renison. Those were very funny. They are girl-centered, but this one is guy-centered. This one also reminded me a little bit of Notes from a Midnight Driver by Jordan Sonnenblick. If you've not read that one, it's great. So this boy ends up, he gets in trouble, he's on probation. And so he ends up, he either is supposed to, he has to do something to kind of improve himself. So he can either be in his dad's auto mechanics class, or he can learn how to knit. And he thinks that like this super hot teacher is going to be in charge. And he ends up being one of the best knitters. So it's fantastic. But he ends up having to keep a diary or a journal to turn in for his probation. Notes from the Midnight Driver, that one is Jordan Sonnenblick. That one also did involve alcohol and a small gnome. And the kid's mad at his parents in that one. His dad ends up going on a date with like his favorite elementary teacher. The parents had just gotten divorced. But in that one, the kid is tasked with like volunteer service, but he ends up in an old folks home. I don't know how to say a nursing home. And so he ends up, trying to better himself. So Jeff, did you have anything to add on Boys Don't Knit in Public?
No, I just loved it.
I did too. It's fantastic if you haven't read it. So I think those were the only ones that I really was going to talk about. Dr. Powell has added in his books, but a couple of things I just wanted to talk about is kind of book talk do's and don'ts. And I am not the best book talker. I will be the first to admit it. I always want to give away too much or sometimes too little. So I was just kind of wanted to highlight just a few things. Definitely give the title and the author. So, if you want to create a slide deck, that's super helpful, but that way kids know or adults know what you're book talking. Try to give the main ideas or the main characters, but not all of it because it takes too long. If you want to read a small part that you think captures the interest, or as Kevin and Amy did with the picture books, show a picture, something that kind of ties it to it. Some of the biggest don'ts, I can't see my slide. Don't give away too much, but I think that's where I tend to go wrong. Don't book talk a book you haven't read. That is one of, I think, the biggest things that librarians and teachers do. And I will never, I've tried to connect kids in the library with books I hadn't actually read, and there was one, I'm trying to remember what it was. I thought it was a super funny, mysterious book. It wasn't. Like, you needed a tissue for it. And can't remember what the title was right now. So I learned, this little girl came back to me. She had actually read it. She said, Miss Shaw, this was like the saddest book I've ever read. You said it was funny and mysterious. And I was like, well, the cover looks like it. And the description, yeah, that was a bad idea. And don't book talk a book you don't honestly like. You know, somebody else could book talk it and get you into it. That was something that another teacher, she was trying to connect with some of our readers, and she hated the book Maniac McGee by Jerry Spinelli. And so she just was not doing a good job with a sell on it. And I ended up reading, I had never read it. So I went ahead and read it. And I loved it. Like, I made all these connections to, it reminded me a little bit of Forrest Gump, but it had some great racial issues that, you know, that came into play later. And I thought, gosh, I love this book. So when I started to book talk it, Ms. Hargrove looked at me and she said, I hated that book, but you make it actually sound good. Like, I want to actually read it. And so she reread it after I had done my book talk to try to get the kids to read it. And she came back and she said, I actually loved it. So I thought that was kind of telling. Amy, Kevin, Jeff, any other tips or tricks? Anything you recommend or don't recommend?
I think you covered that really well.
Well,
I do too.
okay.
I agree.
Well, thanks. My job is done. That's it. I will never have to do anything else. Right? Right. They're like, no, you do. I think that was the end of my slides. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I know that I really had very short, I only had a very short list. I am going to look and see if anyone actually, so after all that, when I tried to get my responses to open and everything, nobody actually signed up for a book talk. Would anyone like to jump in and do one? Don't all talk at once. So let me see. I think Kim had, oh, so actually I do have another. So Kim said she's been a sloth all summer. Do you recommend a place for book recommendations? I love using Goodreads to find things. I also would look at like the Charlie Mae Simon list. Or the diamond list. Kim, I'm not sure what grade level you are. Lindsay said she also likes using Goodreads. School Library Journal has pretty good lists that come out.
I signed up to Mrs. Reader Pants.
Oh, yes.
She has a blog and an email, and every Tuesday she sends out an email with new releases.
Yes.
It's called the New Release Update, and that's where I get a lot of my recommendations.
Yeah, Tarina said she does too.
I also subscribe to a magazine called Bookmarks, and it is new books, but it's all genres, but there is always 3 or 4 young adult new books every month that they push. And if you like reading, it's just a fun magazine.
So I had one. Oh, yeah, go ahead,
I
Kevin.
was just going to say, I suggest taking a few minutes out of your day and going to the public library, because often those librarians can have even more time sometimes than school librarians of finding really great books. And I know for, living in Little Rock, I love the CALS system. So even if you're not a library patron, check them out. Lots of great new stuff in the public library, and talking to the librarians there too.
So Tana was saying her mic is not the best, but she loved In the Wild Light by Jeff Sentner, who we just had at our Bears Right camp this week. Jeff, you read that one too, right?
Yes, I loved it. I mean, I'm always going to love Serpent King most, but it might be my second favorite book of his beyond Serpent King.
And Brandy said, it's not new, but I Will Always Write Back by Caitlin Alafarenka and Martin Gonda with Liz Welch is amazing. Her students loved that one as a read aloud. And that's, so the thing for me with book talking, I always, as the librarian, you see 7 classes a day, or you'll see, 40 classes in a week. Some other recommendations: don't have one list of books to book talk for the whole week, because the kids want the books that you've read, that you're book talking right now. They don't want to wait a month or 3 weeks. So I always tried to have a different list for each class. Also did a lottery to try to make it fair, for a student that wanted to check it out immediately, any of the books. It's hard. It really is hard, but also teachers in the classrooms, if you've got a classroom library, check the library in your school to see if there are multiple copies that you can get access to. Also, share with your students how to download the Libby app, or some other reading apps or book apps, so they could have access to either books on like their phone or an iPad, or whatever other tool they want to use, or have access to the audios. Jeff, do you think, is Serpent King good for 7th, 8th grade? I think it is, but maybe I'm.
I do. I mean, there's a hate crime in it, so you have to deal with that. But it's. I think 7th, 8th grade would like it.
I do too. Sometimes I am a little. To me, it depends on the reader. That's, I always tell the story about my boys. I have 3 boys, and Joseph was ready as a 6th grader for Night by Ellie Wiesel. Lonnie, my youngest, he's going into 9th grade now, and I think he'd be okay now. But you just really have to think about the kids. Tracy said her kids loved Ashley Elston's books. Blake was saying Permabound said 9th through 12th. So, she just hadn't read it yet. That is one of those things I definitely recommend, read it first, have someone else read it first. Those are just some little things. In going to picture books, don't forget our high school kids still like to be read aloud to, and picture books are a great way to connect and do lots of activities where you can get it in a class period. That's just me on my soapbox. Sherry said This Is Our Story is one of her favorite books by Elston. So I forgot one of my other books. Has anyone read Kristen Hanna's The Four Winds? It's fantastic, and it's set during the Dust Bowl, and it is so timely right now. It would definitely be an upper high school book, but it is phenomenal. And I know she normally writes for adults. The Great Alone is another one by Kristen Hanna. The Nightingale. If your high school shelves don't have those books on them, I highly recommend putting those there, because as Lori said, she learned so much about that time period in history. Me too. I think they are fantastic. And Tarina said The House of the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. or Clooney. Yes, Lindsay, I'll put in her. And she has several, but these would just be ones that I think would be fantastic. All right, anything else? Jeff, Kevin, Amy, are we good?
I think we're good.
I think so.
So did everybody at least get one new book idea or something that maybe they had forgotten about and want to go back and book talk? That's one of the best ways to get your circulation going again. It's just getting the kids excited. We know that. Okay. Well,
Have a good day.
bye guys.